join in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And as a side note, I just wanted to mention that Supervisor Forster is unable to attend today. He is attending a National Association of Counties function today as being the chairman or president of the California State Association of Counties. So he wishes he could attend, but is unable today. Our agenda will consist of leading off with sort of the public's perception. I want to encourage everybody, this is meant to be a productive workshop. We look forward to all comments, but we request that you keep them civil. This is not meant to be a, excuse my French, but fish session. It's meant to be productive and hopeful observations that the various agencies that were involved in the Butte Fire can take to heart and utilize for possible improvements. If and when, probably when, we have another incident similar to the Butte Fire. So with that, I guess formalities, I'll need the approval of the agenda from the board here.
Make a motion for the agenda as submitted.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, moved by Portano, seconded by Morgan. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Again, starting off our workshop here, we'll request that anybody that wishes to speak to offer those suggestions and comments that I just referenced, please step up to the board clerk's station over there and sign in on the form so that we can keep a smooth flow going here. And we do want to record all those members that spoke. We are recording this meeting as well, and we'll request that you speak into the microphone so that we don't miss anything over the period of time. But again, those members of the public that would like to address and share their concerns and observations with regard to the Butte Fire will have recorders over here on my left side of the room, your right, that will record your comments, summarize them, and try to keep things as encapsulated as possible. So with that, I believe we had a member of the public wanting to speak. There is a 3-minute limit per topic as well, folks, or per person, so please be brief. We've got a lot of folks here that it looks like want to comment, so be brief.
Okay, first up is Clyde Highfield.
Okay. I'll ask you to state your name and for the record as well.
Hi, my name is Clyde Highfield. I was expecting to be first.
You're here again. Speak directly into the microphone. Right.
Is that better?
We need the speakers in the back of the room to pick it up, so if you can lean into it.
Hello, everybody there?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. My name is Clyde Highfield, and I'm an insurance agent. And I'm here to talk to you today about how to protect yourself and how to protect yourself from your insurance company. There's a lot of questions going on about how this has happened. The first thing I'm going to say is you need to make sure that your policy covers enough cash so when you move out during a disaster, that you have enough to supply yourself for a year. And this is all done through the wordage in the policy. And it also needs to cover your large animals. If you have to board your large animals, that's an extremely high expense when you have to put them somewhere else until your fences, corrals, and water can be restored. The second thing I want to talk about is ordinance of law. It's a little tiny little box, and ordinance of law says if your house is destroyed and you have to rebuild it, you have to build that house back to the new current codes. Your insurance policy will not cover the extra cost of taking your house up to the new codes unless you have that box checked. And usually it supplies about 25 or 50% of your total policy. It's very important. If you have a $100,000 loss and you don't have that coverage and there's another $50,000 in improvements that have to be made, that comes out of your pocket if you're doing it. And the third most important thing to me, my wife and I live in Red Corral, and we moved out during the fire. And when I came back, I said, what did I want my insurance to do for me? And how did I want to be protected? And the third thing is video coverage. Go through your home open all your doors, all your drawers, and video everything, your floors, your ceilings, your walls, everything in the drawers. Because as a normal procedure, when people have a major disaster in their home, they forget about 40% of what they have stored or put away. Well, if you have $100,000, that's $40,000 worth of product or items that you're not going to recover because you can't remember. And so it's real important that you video everything. Your garage, your tools, your clothes, your dishes, your you have art, or you have silverware or firearms. Photograph everything and then store that off-site. Give it to your kids, send it to the cloud, put it in a safe deposit box. It's really important that you cover yourself this way, and your claims through your insurance become very simple. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Helpful advice for all, I'm sure. Again, members of the public wishing to offer their observations, their critiques, their no complaints allowed, but just overall suggestions as to how any number of agencies may help in responding better or making things clearer for you in the event of another fire. Please step forward and offer up those comments. That's what this workshop is all about. Let these agencies hear the perspective of the affected public and how they might improve.
Chairman Pless, if you'd like, many of you know I sent out a survey just to District 3 residents shortly after the Butte Fire. And maybe this will get you thinking and willing to get up and share something. But I'll just share with you the highlights from that survey. Many residents, and again I'm speaking upcountry, I realize not the whole county, but many residents upcountry experience major problems with updates for public safety and official information. And frankly, I see Jim Guidi back there, thank you. One of the comments we heard was that KVGC was one of the best sources of updated information about the fire. But unfortunately, I think you're aware, Jim, that folks up country, most of us don't have easy access, especially when the power's out. So I'll ask you to, maybe you can comment about that later. Then also, the landline equipment was out. Cellular phones and boosters generally don't work without power. We'd love to get, actually throughout the county, I believe we'd love to get some more cell towers to allow our cell phones to actually be usable when there's no power. Let's see, of course, internet did not work without power. Streaming radio did not work without internet. And well, we found out at the wrap-up at the called church right after the fire that the reverse 911, I guess, really wasn't used, or maybe I'll have Sheriff Brian, yeah.
That is called Code Red, Sheriff?
Code Red.
Correct, Supervisor. We had a former system called reverse 911. That, quite honestly, it was a dial-up system. It was very slow. It was very antiquated. It was very difficult to get information out. We had since switched in January of last year to Code Red, which is more of a GPS-based system. It also goes through the internet and allows us to update information much faster and get information out to a lot more people a lot quicker. It's also geocoded, so we can actually specifically address certain areas and put in the parameters where we want that information to go. So it's more designed for those individuals that are impacted, advisory evacuation, volunteer, and employee. In addition to those, we also supplement those, obviously, with people who are recorded on. We knocked on that 800 doors in the evacuation process to ensure that those people were not only notified as best we could through Code Red, but also through personal notification. Now, in the follow-up to the Code Red system, one of the things that we have had difficulty doing is getting people to sign up. And one of the things that I asked my OES to do is to create a notification card couple of weeks. Like with
I hear, I see folks in the back going like.
You're pretty tall, Sheriff.
Every mailbox in Amador County is going to be receiving a card that explains Code Red, how to go on the system, how to get signed up for it. We greatly encourage that. Don't only sign up your home phone, but your cell phones, anything else, any other device that you want to get information to, because if you're out of the area, you'll also get those notifications. It's a robust system. It works in most cases. There are certain areas of this county where, like any place else, it doesn't get hit. But for the most part, when our folks went in to do evacuations, people had already received that information and were already heading out. So the system does function. It is efficient, it is effective, and it is fast. I know in your district, for example, there were a few people that were actually impacted and wanted information. But in those cases, they could call if they had a phone service. We had a 345% increase in phone calls during the fire. They came into dispatch, our front office staff, and emergency operations center. So we also provided direct information regularly to the various media outlets as we received them through CAL FIRE. And keeping in mind through this whole process, this is a CAL FIRE operation. And the role of the sheriff's office in that is to be the law enforcement arm for them when notifications need to go out and evacuations need to occur. So we were a function, a piece of that. It wasn't the sheriff's office operations. It's CAL FIRE. They're the experts. They're the fire experts, and we rely on them for information, resources, and knowledge about how best to attack the issue.
Excellent. I really applaud you for sending out cards to everybody, because it's even I have not signed up yet. I keep saying, yeah, I need to do that today, and then life happens.
Well, it's important, and in some cases it's difficult, because people may not have internet or have a computer or whatever it may be, so we figured out this is the best way to get to everybody, is everybody gets one in their mailbox.
It is.
And if they have any questions or have any difficulties, they can call my office and we'll have somebody walk them through the process.
Excellent.
And thank
Sheriff Ryan, is this kind of similar to like the National Weather Service? And the reason I asked that question, I was out hunting this year, and I was up between Drivetown and Fiddletown, and my phone buzzed and said this national weather alert, expect flash flooding in this area. So that seemed to work really good. And I was, high enough up, there's not a whole lot of cell towers.
Sure, it's very proactive. We can get into it. We can update it regularly from any place that we are. Those of us that have access, and a lot of us do, have access to the updates as we receive those. So that information gets updated. Phone calls ring. Your cell phone or your home phone. It'll get you that information as far as what the latest is that we have to talk about.
Well, thank you. That in itself should be on our list, even though you've already accomplished it. Should be on our list of things agencies have done to improve or will do.
I wouldn't remiss, because as part of this process, as devastating as this was in Calaveras, it certainly could have been over here. And after any significant event like this, we go back and we analyze where we could have been better.
Right.
We realized that we had a need to do some additional training and dispatch with regards to Code Red. We provided that as part of the regular schedule now, and that training is ongoing and continuing.
Great.
So we self-analyze. That's how we get better, is to take a look at how things went and to make those improvements necessary.
Thank you very
What I
much.
recall, Sheriff, from our event up at the Call Church was that folks were automatically signed up in Code Red if they had a landline in their home. But as technology has changed, more and more people have gone away from landlines and just rely on their cell phone for their home phone, and that they have to take a proactive step of actually signing up with their cell phone. That's in that system. So.
But again, how much easier to get a card in the mail? Just fill it out right then.
Well, the card is going to direct you to the website. So,
Right.
Or if you don't have that access, then call us and we'll walk you through.
Right.
Okay.
Good. Thank you, Sheriff. Okay, again, continuing on with public's opportunity to offer their observations and concerns.
Next on the list is Lynn Nightingale.
Sherry? We're
Lynn Nightingale's
going in
next.
sign-up order here, Sherry. Stay in the front row, Sherry. You can jump up there pretty quick.
Thank you for doing this. thank you for doing this meeting. I think it's a great job, and especially Lynn, who sent out the survey, and since I helped her get that out, double thank you to everybody. The main thing I'd like to speak to is that the gist of the survey results seem to be the whole communication piece failed in different ways. I'm delighted to hear Sheriff Ryan say that everyone is going to be getting this card informing them of how the reverse number, or now the code red system works. People have asked us a lot about, how come they didn't get phone calls, or what's the deal. So thank you, kudos. My main concern is with the Office of Emergency Services or the Health Department, whoever was responsible for getting the special filter masks for smoke delivered to various sites. The only reason I knew those masks existed was because I was driving back from the Elk Grove area on Saturday, and the radio station, who also did a terrific job, if you could get them, because of the reception up country, was talking about the masks for smoke at various sites where you could pick one up. And the one that was furthest up country was the church on Ridge Road. Now, the smoke was getting bad down in Jackson and in the 49 corridor. By the time I got to Pioneer, it was choking. There was nowhere up there to get these filtered masks. So I tried to do something. I took a dozen from that church up. I took it to the people near where I live. And then I finally, after much attempts, I called the radio station. Finally, I sent Lynn a text. And she was actually able to get masks delivered later that afternoon up to Buckhorn Grocery Store and other places. So my question would be to Sheriff Ryan and the Emergency Service Department, what's your plan for helping in situations up country? It often seems to be neglected, whether we're in District 3, District 5, District 4, or even there's grassland. I mean, you just don't know where these fires might occur. So I would be very interested to see the emergency services plan updated and distributed so that people who are interested enough in this can look on your website or the sheriff's website or whoever. Thank you very much.
I believe that was largely a function of our public health office and other GSA
Yes.
staff.
If you'd like me to speak to it now, I can speak to it.
Yes, if you would. Dr. Kerr? And apparently the comment is centered primarily around the method of distribution of those masks and how to get them broadly distributed.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I am Dr.
Pull up mic down just a little bit.
I'm Dr. Rita Kerr, the health officer for Amador County since the fall of 2014. I will speak directly to masks now and then speak on the rest of our later. The N95 masks, which we had available in the General Services warehouse for public health emergency preparedness since the pandemic flu outbreak several years ago, were kind of a light bulb thing that went on when the smoke settled in on the weekend after the fire started. So really Saturday morning was the first really smoky morning. And we said, well, we've got all these masks sitting there. Let's figure out a way to get them out. So this was not something that we had anticipated ahead of time and had a distribution plan already in place. So that's a learning opportunity, and one that we can, now that we've done it, have put into our plans going forward. So the initial thing that we did was say to the GSA warehouse operator who was called in on a weekend, where are those pallets? Can you tell us how many you can find? And we at first were able to honor 2 pallets. So our first round of distributions was to where we knew people were congregating in the community. There were several churches who were offering meals for free to people to come and avail themselves, and also donation drop centers. And so those were the first round of distribution. We relied on help from Jim McCarty from the Air Quality District, who loaded up his pickup truck. I put a bunch in the back of my car, and we had one of the GSA staffers with a pickup truck who went out with boxes of masks and started distributing them. Inside the EOC at the Sheriff's Office, my public health emergency preparedness coordinator was working to figure out the names, addresses, and get that information pushed out to the public through the radio station and social. Another that was in the first round of distribution was the pooling center that was in place at the Jackson Library. We did a second round of distribution when requests started coming in from the community. Hey, I'd be willing to be a distribution site. I'm a local restaurant or a retail outlet. And I do appreciate Supervisor Morgan giving me a call, because what she did was the footwork to identify some spots in her area, which was the Lockwood Fire Station and the Payless Market up country. And we were able to get masks delivered up there. So it was really a 3 rounds of distribution. And the great thing was, in the meantime, the GSA found several more pallets. We had a total of 4,000 masks distributed. That was part of our emergency preparedness cache. We also sent 150 cots from the GSA warehouse up to the rancheria that were used in sheltering. And these are the kind of supplies that public health emergency preparedness purchases, anticipating the need, keeps in warehouse, and we're able to mobilize and utilize those resources in this kind of event. And now we're, of course, going to have to restock those things going forward.
Just a comment, I sit on the Mountain Valley EMS Agency. It's a regional thing for Amador, Calaveras, and Mariposa, and John is my alternate. And Mountain Valley also has large caches of different supplies, medical supplies, masks, and all those things. And it's all part of this national preparedness disaster grant stuff. So. Yeah. We all got to keep that in mind. They're just a phone call away for activation.
You're not only a phone call away, they were
there
on it with me
yeah.
from Wednesday night on throughout the event and beyond in Calaveras County after our evacuation.
Question I have for Dr. Kerr.
Yes.
Is those N95 masks that you mentioned, how effective are they as far as protecting from smoke effects?
I'll let Jim from Air Quality speak to the particulars when he comes up, but the get-go is that these masks are meant to filter small particulate matter and small diameter biologic agents, and they're very effective in something like smoking. I was actually wearing one as I was running around loading boxes, and a couple times I took it off because you just want to breath of what you think is going to be fresh air. You notice a huge difference without it.
Thank you.
Scott, did you capture that Mountain Valley EMS as sort of a contact point between public health and?
What was the name of the group? I'm sorry.
Mountain Valley
Emergency Medical Services Agency.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Kerr.
Thank you.
Just a couple comments with regards to that. I also serve as the director of OES for the county, and one of the things that we did do in the value of setting up our EOC is to have people like Dr. Kerr in that facility with us. They came up with the idea of the resources to do those now. As a learning opportunity for us, that's not something that we had on our playbook. At the start of the fire, it developed as the fire developed, and people were responding and reacting to things as they move forward. But that is certainly notifications that could go out on the code red system as we give these orders, and where locations are for those types of devices, where cooling shelters are, and all those things are certainly viable use for code red. And we will take that comment to heart, and we'll make sure that information gets included.
Thank you.
I know we have a number of times a year that with the hospital and Mountain Valley EMS, we have emergency preparedness mock disasters, and I know the Sheriff's Office and OAS attend those, so those are really good training, and they worked out pretty well a few years ago in the flu epidemic. So.
Okay, next up is Sherry Curtis.
Good afternoon. I wish to speak on behalf of the Upcountry Council at this point, just to let you know that fire preparedness, awareness has been one of our main issues we formed years ago. We had, about 3 years ago, a committee formed to try to receive some kind of increased cell tower communication upcountry. And for those who may not be able to have landlines during when a power outage is going on. One thing that might help you is what we did, is to get a ham license to be able to communicate when you're up in the mountains. The other thing was we were trying to find out how government agencies through a grant or something could help the local radio station get more power, because we couldn't even hear it if we wanted to, a country with power. So they don't transmit far enough for the upcountry residents. So I would encourage you to look for any kind of grant or something to help the local emergency system, whether it's through the government or through the radio station, to help get so we can hear upcountry. There was another issue we had, that anytime we would have smoke upcountry, people would call Amador Fire Protection District and say, what's going on? And they would go, sometimes, I don't know, it's not our fire. So we were advocating that there would be coordination between CAL FIRE and the local fire districts. So when the public sees smoke, they can call someone and find out what's going on. Another thing we would like to see is in wild and scenic areas, is if the special requirements that are given to fire agencies and whether they could drop retardants or not be included. I mean, be suspended, especially when you have a fire situation after 4 years drought with the combustible brush trees that are dying, not only of bark beetles, but lack of water. That somehow it's important to save private properties and humans as well as it is to provide the watershed, because without that, what we've seen is 51 square miles in Calaveras County destroyed because fire got out of control, because it does make its own wind after it starts really burning. And I would encourage all in Amador County to go over to Calaveras County and look and see if they could imagine that happening to this county as well. I would also ask that you encourage all federal agencies within our jurisdiction to maintain their local properties like they want the private property owners to do, on maintaining and clearing up the brush and the road access to their properties when they go down into, like the BLM has 12,000 acres that were burned next to our properties in Calaveras County. They were unable to get down the road to their BLM properties. Even if a fire engine wanted to, they couldn't get there. Another question we have is to help coordinate fire agencies to learn to know where all the water sources are in a county, on the local ponds, because in Calaveras County they weren't drafting next to, the houses were burned right next to ponds. So I know when the fire gets going, it's hot and heavy and it's dangerous. But somehow they were driving further away to get water than they needed to. So, thank you.
Sure. Well, can I just encapsulate that last comment in the potential to GIS map for draftable pond facilities? That's a function that our local transportation commission is doing, all the GIS mapping for a whole host of services around the county, and that would be another layer of that GIS mapping that could be sort of like an overlay that just showed suitable sized water sources for at least helicopter drafting. I mean, you're not going to land a super scooper over up, but by the helicopter drafting. They've drafted out of my pond on my ranch to put out a fire down in Middlebar, so it doesn't take a real big pond. Okay, anybody else on, next up?
This is Dick Lockwood.
Mr. Lockwood.
Members of the board, I'm Dick Lockwood, retired police chief from the city of Jackson a long time ago. I've seen my share of disasters, nothing like this one almost was. This county dodged a bullet with a few exceptions, and God's direction for the wind. This whole thing went on Calaveras County, and I've been over there with some relief efforts, and I know what Mrs. Curtis is talking about. It's just flat ugly. It looks like somebody dropped a bomb over there. I would wager to you a background that I have, police work. I put in the communications center in Astoria, Oregon. When I was up there, I was an air traffic controller in the Air Force, and so I speak radio and communications pretty well. I would wager that almost everything you're going to hear today is going to come under the umbrella of communications. And what can we do that might be a little bit different or a lot different. So I wanted to offer just a couple of suggestions. As a police chief, I was not what you would call a big fan of police scanners, because it ended up usually with armchair quarterbacking, or worse than that, perhaps somebody actually showing up on the scene when you don't need any more help. That said, for some time now, I've had this little battery-powered scanner. Battery is the key word, because when our power went out, for reference, I live about a half a mile north of the golf course in Pioneer. We sat for days worrying that the wind would shift, because had it shifted about 20 degrees, Pioneer was right in the path of what was happening over in Calaveras County. My observation of different things that went on was that the CAL FIRE maps were pretty useful to start with, and not so useful as the fire progressed. If you needed a quick idea of which way the wind was going, you're better off wetting your finger and sticking it up in the air, or hopefully you got a little weather station. Back to the battery thing, my personal house and a lot of them, what, 6,000 people I think were out of power, and that included the local phone company, which meant that your TV local station, which would have been a good source for information, did not work. Even if you had power going, the power was out to Volcano Communications. So that said, a couple of things that each of us can do and should do. I'm not selling these things, and I don't care if you get one or not, but it was immensely helpful, even though the traffic was, even though I know radio codes, the traffic was so voluminous that it was hard to get the information you needed off of different channels. The other thing is, you need, at your individual homes, you need a phone that plugs into the jack. Most of us are now using these wireless deals, and guess what? They run on electricity, and when the electricity's out, your phone doesn't work. But if you have a hardline plugged phone, it will work, it will ring, and you can get some information that way. Somebody already spoke about the fact that the local radio station doesn't reach us up there. Somewhere around the casino, somewhere in that vicinity, we can start to receive it on our car radio. But even if you're sitting out in the garage with your car radio on, you can't pick up 1340 on the dial. And that's a tremendous source of information. The ham radio folks are on this scanner, and anything that is not hard programmed, you can probably get it. But again, there's so much clutter. I would respectfully suggest the county, perhaps through the sheriff, my pal, needs to think about a dedicated channel where folks could tune by if they have a scanner and get up-to-the-minute information, which would include weather, would include evacuation orders and things of that nature. Again, Facebook was one source of information, but it was just flat full of good information and a lot of misinformation too. And that's something that I don't think we can control, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. The local radio station, I'm not even sure how extensive their coverage was. I know the folks there, and they usually do a really, really good job, but as I say, looking for weather information in particular, evacuation information specifically, it was difficult, if not impossible, to get. And it occurred to me too that as a lot of us on generators, in the middle of this bullet that we dodged, are driving up and down 88 with 3 or 4 5-gallon cans of gasoline, which also could lend itself to making more trouble than your generator is worth. All that said, though, I think everyone did a really good job. I happened to be out at a friend's house on Taboo Road watching the fire right straight across the canyon from his house. And we had deputy sheriffs from Amador County, but we also had a contingent come by and knock and give us the evacuation order, and they were from El Dorado County. The fire rig in the driveway of this massive property that my friend owns was from the city of Dixon. And just overall, I think the thing worked really good. I do, though, think that we dodged a real big bullet. Thank you for your time.
Just a word of advice, if you use that phrase, dodge a bullet, as an elected official, you're subject to criticism in social media, so. Be careful. Sharon, can you specify on that receivable by scanner, or I don't know what the proper terminology, just so a dedicated
channel
that is received via scanner.
They used to call them crystals, but they don't probably call them that.
Ham radios.
No, one thing I will say, there's the request for communication, it is true, but I've worked a number of fires. I'm not a firefighter, just a grandozer and stuff like that. And one problem, I think whether you talk to your emergency personnel, they'll tell you this, is trying to get good, accurate information on a huge fire that's timely. Is unless you're on the fire line, it's pretty impossible. That's just talking about just one small area where you're at, because that fires move so fast, so many different areas. Trying to get, up-to-date instant communications, it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. You talk to people around the fire, there's confusion among the firefighters, what's going on where and how at times. You want the best communication, the best information you get, I understand that. But something you got to realize, it's a crisis, and people are going left, people are going right. There's a lot of moving parts. So it's just, people say they want to take information. You can request that. You may get that. Doesn't even mean it'll be right. CDF does the best they can, I think, but it's a real, when you have that big a fire, it's a very hard animal to control. They're doing the best they can to fight the fire, trying to get information out. I think sometimes that's why you see a little bit of a lag time. They're trying to make sure the information they get out is correct. Now, if you're on site at a house, you may say, yeah, the fire's doing this or that, their information's old, but sometimes it's really hard to get all that information out. It just is.
Any other members?
Next is Kathleen Harmon.
Kathleen?
Hi, Kathleen Harmon. Thank you again for having this. Two things. First of all, and we all know this, we're very fortunate to have the Jackson Rancheria open its doors and become the center that it did for evacuations. In the event that the fire threatened the Rancheria, I just wanted to bring to a point that the churches that did step up, many were not equipped with kitchens that could facilitate feeding masses, and whether there should be some kind of plan in place if we are ever in the situation again and don't have access to the generosity of the Rancheria, that we maybe equip or educate possible evacuation centers so that they have a plan of action as to handling an influx of people. The churches in Calaveras County that did this learned a lot, but flying by the seat of their pants at the very initial onset, it might be something we could do proactively to equip facilities that might be able to be evacuation centers. The second thing, and I don't know how you can control this, is donations. Calaveras is still sitting on 2 warehouses full of generosity from people that nobody has a house to put in. So there's clothing, there's household goods, there's furniture, and it's being stored because the donor wanted that to go, is to try and stifle maybe that conversation. I think a lot of that probably happened on Facebook, but so those are just the two comments that, and we're handling the long-term recovery for Calaveras at our foundation. So we're in the middle of getting clearance to rebuild houses right now for those with unmet needs. So there is recovery happening, just a positive note. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would reiterate the appreciation for the Rancheria stepping up on that. I know I've had the discussions with our OES coordinator about, you know, that was a voluntary action on their part and very much appreciated. I believe in our OES plan, they are listed as one of those points we had in high school gymnasiums and churches and things of that nature that would have served, albeit far less comfortably, I'm sure, than the Rancheria was able to provide.
Actually, I'd like to offer them a round of applause for the work they did.
Go ahead. Certainly. This is the
Jim Foley, Health and Human Services Director. So the shelters are actually determined by the Red Cross. I know there's some folks here from Red Cross. So what I would say is that the Red Cross does determine a list that we send to social services. I actually represent 3 departments that were involved in the Butte Fire response. One of those is social services, which is when a shelter is to be open, social services goes in and starts. We actually were a little bit out of the normal response pattern, but we work with Red Cross to work that out. We go in and start signing people up in the shelter, bringing them in, getting them registered, providing basic information to them, and then we coordinate with the health department. We do this for 1, 2, 3 days until Red Cross comes in and takes over most of that. We actually continue to sort of interleave with the Red Cross so that we work some of the shifts, they work some of the shifts, and coordinated resources on an ongoing level. They did take over the direct medical. They brought in a number of nurses. I also represent the behavioral health department. Again, due to the Rancheria, we really did not have a lot of mental health needs. And my 2 cents on the way that those 3 departments could improve is in line with what everyone else is talking about, is improved communication. For us in particular, in the shelter itself, we want to communicate more effectively with the Red Cross to coordinate resources, let them know we don't need as much, and the county's able to meet the needs, and that would allow, in this case in particular, would allow Red Cross to move some of those resources over to Calaveras, because initially that shelter was Amador, and then as time went by, it became almost 100% Calaveras, but we kept staffing because they were really, really short and really struggling.
Jim, can I ask you, how would you improve the communication between those shelters that you operate in the Red Cross?
I've already done some of that.
Okay.
What happened was we didn't have the right people to reach out to at the Red Cross level. I've now met them. I went out to the evening meeting that was up at the Rancheria. I met the new people that are coming in, had their number, and now if something like that comes up, I would immediately start.
Jim, can you speak right into the mic?
Pardon?
Right into the mic, speak right into it. You're not picking up at all. Yeah.
A little closer.
Okay. So I'm already communicating with Red Cross folks, have their numbers, have their cards, and in the future we'll reach out to them as soon as shelter starts open.
Jim, do you know if they interface with state OES on these type of situations? The reason I asked that is, it's been quite a few years ago, we had a lot of flooding down in the Rancho Murieta area, And at that point in time, the Board of Supervisors were running the Office of Emergency Service for the county, and they called up and said, well, we need to send 4,000 people up to your county. And I said, we really don't have a place for them. We can help you with some of them, but we don't have enough room for 4,000 people.
Well, I'm not sure if Red Cross interfaces directly with state OES. The difficulty we ran into is that the folks who were on site at the Rancheria were taking care of business. You know, we were the boots on the ground folks. But Red Cross was making decisions from the state level coming out of Sacramento, and so they would hear something and without it having been verified would make decisions which would then impact us. And so now I have the numbers of people further up the chain and will be able to communicate more directly.
Yeah, the first few days when Brian, John, and myself were going over to the fairgrounds for briefings, we all met the Red Cross folks. So I'm glad that you made the effort to go up and introduce yourself and get on level with them.
So when the shelter was open, I was actually out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually working at the shelter for the entire time that it was open. Initially, it was 12, 14-hour days, and then it kind of tapered down as Red Cross brought in more and more people.
I think Dr. Kerr's got something to add.
I would just like to address directly one of the questions that Kathleen brought up, which is food safety, shelter setting. We were, of course, very fortunate that the Rancheria already is an organization that is used to serving banquets to large groups of people, already outfitted to do that. But she is correct that in the instance that we had to stand up a shelter in a high school gymnasium or a church hall, something like that, that issue needs to be looked at from the get-go. And there is a tool that's available, and we actually had our public health emergency preparedness staff meet with Mike Israel of Environmental Health last week to make sure that in the future, if a shelter is open, that environmental health from the get-go uses this audit tool that looks at things like food handling, safety, sanitation, availability of proper hand washing stations, restrooms, showers, and all those things that impact our ability to make sure that we minimize the risk of communicable disease and shelter.
Very good, thank you. Next up.
This is Carol Mars.
Come on up, Carol. Thank you. Front lines.
Okay, I'd like to thank you guys for putting this on. I think it's very beneficial. And I would also like to thank the Sheriff's Department and also the Highway Patrol. They did a terrific job of keeping people out of the area that they were not supposed to be in. We, as you know, we own some property there in Amador County down around the McCollum River up to Lake Butte. In the fire, we lost about 500 plus or minus acres of brush. So, on one hand, that was a good thing, but on the other hand, we lost a lot of fencing and kind of disabled the property for some time. In the past, my family, when I was a little girl, used to, along with the forestry, do burns in that area. And they would burn part of it and then another part and another part. And they never had the brush, all of the fuel. I would like to encourage maybe CAL FIRE to do more prescribed burns. That if it's at all possible, I mean, upcountry is just an accident waiting to happen. It's very scary. So, and also, we watched the helicopters take water out of Lake Cebu. I think that was wonderful. It was amazing, those airplanes, and I don't know the names of the airplanes, but, and they also took water out of our little pond too, like you mentioned. And all in all, I think they did a heck of a job. I understand we're in Calaveras County. They brought a lot of people in that were not familiar with the properties. You know, and I don't know how you solve that problem. But maybe they need to have more local people that are familiar with the areas, in control or in charge or whatever. But again, thank you very much, and I appreciate all your help, and you're right, we dodged the bullet that it was more against Amador County, not towards it.
Thank you, Carol. You're almost reading from my notes. Local involvement. I've got a couple of instances where as a result of lack of it, and I understand the event turned into such a sizable event that CAL FIRE turned it into a type 1 incident, and there was people from all over the state of California, Beverly Hills, and all over the place. But there were some things that occurred that wouldn't have occurred had local knowledge and familiarity with both the terrain and the roadway system and so forth wouldn't have happened if there was a little more local involvement on that side of things. And so that's a suggestion I've got for them as well. Thanks, Carol. Mr. Hoffman?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I sure appreciate this opportunity. I really don't have any complaints at all because I thought the folks in the fire, from the law enforcement folks, firefighters, to the communications folks, all did an excellent job, the best that they could. We also had some preparations that helped on our part. We were not evacuated. That was a great blessing to us. Had we been evacuated, I'd have more experience and probably some concerns, but we would, in my view, been the next to be evacuated. We live just north of 88 in the Pine Grove area. Knowing what I know about the fuel break situation, the fires fighting that had it gone across that fuel break from Taboo to Pine Acres, that I would have been next, because 88 would not have held that fire at that point. So we prepared to evacuate and got our things together, and of course went through those emotions of what do you leave behind and what do you keep. At the same time, we were fortunate. We had, of course, we were out of power for several days. We had a well, therefore we had no water, but we had water stored in buckets and barrels and drinking water available, and so we survived fine on that respect for those days. We also had dug out very early on some old battery-operated radios. So how old they are, it wasn't until after the fire that I realized that the reception would have been a lot better had I raised the antenna.
Forgot that little detail.
My wife also had one that she carries around with her when she does a lot of walking. She's a walker, and so we were able to keep up on the communications. I thought the communications folks, the local radio station, which we were fortunate to get at our house, did an outstanding job of dispelling rumors and keeping us informed. Of course, we didn't have to worry about Facebook because we didn't have power, so we didn't hear some of those rumors. But what did concern us, and I think has been articulated well through here, was the potential to be evacuated. Or if you were unfortunate to be evacuated, your concerns. Mainly, is my house okay? What is the latest word on that? Am I going to come back to something or nothing at all? And we were certainly concerned and caught up with that concern. If we would evacuate, where would we go? Shelters were pretty full by that point if we would have been called to evacuate. But more importantly, what would become of our home? It occurred to me that in all of our efforts to plan to prevent fires, we need to plan to prevent evacuations. That's where our concerns come from. Well, I would just like to push that in all of our efforts, in our planning efforts, is to plan to prevent evacuations. That's different. It'll take care of fires, but that's a completely different rationale as we plan our prevention programs. That's my suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John.
Next is Mr. Don Heisenbuttel.
Thanks for the opportunity again.
Good afternoon, John.
How you doing? Good. Just two major things. One, well, three major things. I'm a registered professional forester. I live in Pine Grove. of the most important things I learned in forestry school was everything's connected. And it's not just the ecosystem, it's the ecosystem, social issues, and the economy. And one of the things we desperately need in Amador County is some sort of infrastructure to deal with the need for thinning our forest lands to protect us against fire. I mean, John Hoffman made a good point that we need to deal with evacuations, but we also need to deal with reducing the risk of fire in our county, which means reducing the fuel loads throughout the county, and what do we do with that material? So I think we need a discussion about potential infrastructure to deal with all the materials that will come off of fuel reduction. The other thing I wanted to point out is you folks are familiar with the Cal-Am forestry team. One of our game plans in the next month or so is to develop a community wildfire protection plan that spans the McCollum River, so that it'd be a bi-county plan, and we'll be coming back to the board with a report on that shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? I know we've kind of bounced back and forth between public sector and agencies, but it was necessary to keep the flow here. Mr. Votaw, how are you?
Good, how are you guys today?
Good.
I kind of wanted to add on the gentleman that spoke first in regards to insurance. My name is Jeff Oates. I'm an insurance agent here in town. And a couple of things, I don't want people leaving this meeting and running and calling their insurance agent and say, do I have this, do I have that, do I have that? I mean, you can do that, but the thing that I wanted to say is most insurance packages today are actually package policies. So I kind of wanted to add to what he had said is, he had mentioned building ordinance coverage. Typically today in the industry is not every, but the majority of insurance policies carry 10% of building ordinance coverage. So as the example that I used, $100,000, you would have $10,000 in contest or in building ordinance coverage for that. So more coverage, more, obviously 10% is 10%, sorry. The other thing is the additional living expense. Again, this generalization, but most policies provide up to 1 year of additional living expenses. So if you have to be away from your home, like a number of people in Calaveras, they allocate up to 1 year. And when it's deemed a state of emergency, that actually goes up to 24 months. So those are, and then that additional living expense also provides housing, eating out, and things of that nature. So I didn't want my phone actually ringing off the hook, but I have a number of my clients that are here.
We've got several more insurance agents here too, so you guys can all have your.
And his message is, you're fine, don't call him.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, I won't call you, but am I covered?
Yeah. Only when the fire starts in Calaveras County and comes into our county. No, I'm kidding. Not to make light of that, but I do want to take the time to just. I was at the Rancheria when the fire initially started, or when they set up, and I wanted to thank everybody with the Jackson Rancheria. We had actually set up kind of like a triage center there, and to help people. And the amazing thing is, as soon as anybody went into the facility, they never came out. So it was like a waste of our time to be there. They had, I even said on the radio at one point, why would you want to go to the Calaveras County Fairgrounds when you can go to the Jackson Rancheria? So Ricky Hoffman, I know he was here, but thank him for all that he did, and also the Amador County Fire Protection as well as CAL FIRE. They did a phenomenal job, and the saying, we dodged the bullet, we did. And with that being said, I don't want to scare people, but you do need to make sure that you are covered for all those intangibles that he had mentioned. Thank you.
If I'd just comment that the 10% increase for a new ordinance and building codes would be woefully insufficient. From our experience, we passed the limited density rural dwelling ordinance here that allows people to construct single-family dwellings that have been originally bid out in the modern day cycle with fire sprinklers and temper glass, exterior glazing on all the windows and so forth, have seen upwards of $30,000 and $40,000 cost savings to build to an 1990 code cycle versus the 2015 code cycle. So
yeah, so to put that in layman's terms, if you have a $300,000 house, you would have $30,000 in protection,
right.
which, you know, so if your house was built after 1985, then you're probably at 10% may be adequate, but you know, there's not a huge expense to endorse or increase that to 25 or even upwards to 50%. So that could be an issue for some of the older homes, you know, prior to obviously
some of the cost of the new building codes with installing fire sprinklers.
Fire sprinklers is a huge issue. I've addressed, or I've been part of that with Calaveras County. That has become a huge, just the sprinklers themselves. So,
are they looking at putting in place that LDRD, you know? If you can talk, I know John gave him information, I did too, and I haven't heard much of that.
What was the question?
Limited density rural dwelling, is Calaveras working on putting that in place? Have you heard?
I have not heard that.
Okay. You said you could work with him, I thought you might have.
Thanks, Mr. Rebecca Brown.
Afternoon, Supervisors. Thank you very much for having this gathering. I'm sure it's one of the many situations where people are getting together trying to solve problems in an environment and within their special organizations, whether it's government agency or other neighborhoods. One of the things that I noticed when we had power and I got on Facebook was the issue of large animal rescue and what to do with large animals. And I don't know if anybody from the Lawton family and those who helped over there at that ranch are here, but there's a lot of very happy people and very grateful people for the work that happened there and the work that was done by all the others who helped provide homes away from home for large animals. And the Amador County, let's see, I can't tell. Amador County
Animal Rescue Team.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. And they've had two big opportunities to do a lot of learning, and I think that's another point that should be on the list of examining and communicating and organizing for the next time we need something, so that we don't have to wait for an emergency announcement, but that people know when and where and what to do ASAP, and also that folks who don't have ways to move their large animals out know what to do. I don't have large animals, so I'm not knowledgeable, but I sure saw a lot of work going on websites and on across the street from Rayleigh's, so that should be put on the to-do list. Thanks to everybody who helped all those animals.
Thank you.
This is Dan Edward.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Dan Edwards. I'm the emergency coordinator for the amateur radio emergency services here in Amador County. Also work closely with Sergeant Silva and Sheriff Ryan's department on auxiliary communications for the disaster healthcare services. I've heard the mention of ham radio several times this afternoon, and so I thought I'd take the opportunity just to say a few things about amateur radio. There are roughly 200 licensed amateur radio operators in Amador County right now. The number is growing. We maintain a repeater on top of Mount Zion, which covers not only all of Amador County, probably not some of the more northern parts of where the elevation gets high, but certainly south and the surrounding counties. And it is our charter as licensed, being licensed by the Federal Communications Commission. Part of our license is based on emergency preparedness and community service. So it is very much part of what we do to support activities like this. We did participate at the Red Cross shelter at the Rancheria and maintained round-the-clock communication services there. And I think as a result of today, we will probably become even more ingrained in future operations, and we look forward to participating in that. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you a question, sir? Mr. Lockwood mentioned battery-powered handheld scanners. Are they capable of receiving ham radio transmissions?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. The simple answer is yes. The bands that we normally use are all shared by both emergency services and amateur radio. I shouldn't say shared, they're partitioned, but the scanners generally span all of those bands. So the simple answer is yes, they could.
So as these 200 ham radio operators are talking to each other over their ham radios, others could be receiving whatever pertinent information is coming out of those conversations.
They definitely could, and we would look forward to providing, at least supporting, if not providing, community communication. Certainly, the dissemination of information is extremely important and needs to be controlled, and we're well aware of that. There are protocols and hierarchies which we follow so that we don't disseminate improper information or incorrect information. That certainly would be available to everyone.
It would be a neat collaboration to work out between yourselves, radio, CAL FIRE. Just accurate information is getting out. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This is Sherry Curtis. Now I'm coming as a private owner who was affected by the Butte Fire in Calaveras County. Another suggestion after the fire is what you can do to be ready is to get your environmental department organized to be able to have crews of the construction companies that clear up debris and so forth have to have special training. And that, if you could get those people done before a disaster happens, it would save time. Another thing that might help is to coordinate with FEMA and those that come in to declare your property, the different problems that you might have. I had at least six different people coming separately to come out. One would come to look for toxic waste, paint and stuff. Another would come for propane tanks. Another would drive all the way out to look at each different segment of the environmental contamination. And with the FEMA people, they were trying to help, and they would come and they would draw a plan. And then the environmental department would come also with two ladies all dressed in white, again, to draw a scale of what needed to be cleaned up. The coordination after cleanup is done between that and PG&E, who would also come out to check to see if you had trees near their power lines to take down. All of these things need to be coordinated, and it is still now almost 4.5, 5 months after the fire, and we've been cleared on the environmental cleanup, but we still haven't been cleared by the county's department to rebuild whatever we may need to do. So the delays and the extra cost, this fire has been termed one of the most costly in California. Some of the coordination, and if they would come together instead of 6 different trips to assess a property, might be helpful in keeping the cost down to clean up after the fire. Thank you. It's just the environmental regulations, they each have their own responsibility, and so they do it as best they can.
Government is no stranger to redundancy.
Thank you, Troy Bowers, Amador County Fairgrounds. When the fire first started, we were one of the first ones to be contacted by CAL FIRE to be a base camp. And they were moving in our property at 6 o'clock that night that it started. And by the next day, it was a full-on with them. Eventually, they broke off and made 2 base camps, our fairgrounds and Calaveras County Fairgrounds. We have a lot of capacity out there to deal with a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with here. As the event developed, we became a center to receive a lot of the large animals through the good work of ACART. There's a lot of people who did a lot of really heroic things during this fire, and we're here to serve.
Thank you. It was impressive the first morning after the fire started to be out there at the fairgrounds and see this virtual military campaign in full swing out there.
National Guard, firefighters from all over the state. It was an amazing thing to watch.
Oh, it was. I took a couple videos. I think that maybe it might come in handy sometime, because our fairs have been struggling for funding, and seeing the amount of, I guess, just resources they had. That fairground was plumb full. They were going out in the farmers' fields. They were parking everywhere they could, and it was really showed how important emergency center is for areas. And I think we'll be seeing more fires, more floods, more whatever in those fairgrounds. I think it would behoove the residents of this county and the state to keep them alive. They're very important.
Good point, Brian. The legislature needs to fund these fairgrounds. They're critical in a disaster like this.
This is Gary Thomas.
Gary? No? No comment?
None.
Okay. Anybody else on the list? Jen, anybody else on the list?
Mr.
Oh, we got one, we got.
Oh, there we go.
I live out on
Please
Road.
Sir, please state your name and sign this.
Bob Allen.
Don't worry about it. Jen will write it down.
Yeah.
Bob Allen.
And we were all out there and very impressed with the emergency efforts to help us out, get out of the area. But one thing I had a question about is when the evacuation order came out for our area, Butte Road, it seemed there were a lot of emergency people around it to indicate that we needed to leave. But when we all got on Butte Road, we were stuck. And traffic wasn't consistent. And not until I got my phone and called 911, and pretty impressive how quickly within 10 minutes the traffic did start moving. But I think, just the question came to mind, did they send anybody out to do traffic before the emergency evacuation came?
I don't know exactly the day that was. I was at Taboo Road and Highway 88, like, I want to say the second day when they're evacuating everybody.
It was Friday, the fire started Wednesday?
Yeah.
It was Thursday evacuation.
Yeah, I think I was there, and it was an absolute mess, to be quite honest. There's one CHP, and he looked like he had more in his hands full.
And he was sending us all up country.
Well, I don't remember seeing that. I remember offering to help this man, because he had people, one lady almost ran him over backing up, and it was just, I offered to help him. He wanted some help, and he said, no, he didn't. Okay, fine, I'm out of here.
Mr. Chair, don't we have experts here that might be able to answer that?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I was very impressed with how quickly they came after I called, but we were sitting for quite a while.
They were there when the traffic was sitting. I was there, and the traffic was backed up to the road for as far as you could see, plus some. But maybe somebody, like you said, somebody could answer that.
Thank you for your comments. So traffic control with some urgency. Well, just for clarification, you were headed eastbound on Taboo to 88.
9 acres to go on 88 and go.
Oh, 88.
Just a comment, the responsibilities for the roads in Amador County belong to California Highway Patrol. We did call upon them to provide that resource for us. Our role and responsibility at that time from the Sheriff's Office was the evacuation piece. Yeah, I understand that there's a lot of issues with the roads here. They're not equipped to handle large numbers of individuals or vehicles moving at any one time. So there are some things that came out of there. We have worked with our partners, the Highway Patrol, to try to identify some of the shortcomings in that process as far as when stations were set up, when they were taken down. In some cases, they came down a little earlier than they probably should have. It created some issues, some traffic issues, but we've been in communication with our CHP partners on those, and I'm confident that the ongoing discussions, we will do the best we can, but in an emergency situation like that, we have a huge influx of people trying to get out of a narrow slope. It's going to cause a bit of difficulty for us.
I'm Sheriff, when I was there, one thing I did see is I saw one CHP officer, he's trying to basically manage traffic on Highway 88. Traffic will stop in Taboo Road, and then you had people wanting to go back in there. So he's telling them, hey, you can't go back in, and that's when they almost ran him over, I think inadvertently. And he probably could use some help there, and there was, I'm sure everybody was stressed trying to get all things covered at one time, but that's kind of what was going on at that intersection at that time.
And I understand that, Supervisor, and that was one of the issues, it's just a manpower issue. For Highway Patrol to get there, we called it mutual aid. We probably had at least a dozen different agencies from throughout the region that we called in to help us with the evacuation process. And subsequent to that, those areas that were evacuated needed to be patrolled for looting and any potential criminal activity would have occurred there. And I can tell you that response, it was delivered by our partners and sheriff's personnel and our local personnel as well, with the police department, probation, DA's office, everybody that jumped in. We had reports of 2 burglaries at the end of that after evacuating some 2,800 homes. That during that entire process, we had 2 small burglary reports out of that. So I think from that perspective, the coverage of that area, to protect those areas when people were missing, went as well as we expected.
Good job, thank you.
Okay, really at this point in time, and we've had this occurring throughout the course of this first segment, but go ahead.
I thought it was kind of good talking. Came up earlier.
That's where we're at, is the response from the agencies. Basically, we'd like to hear from the agencies of what lessons for improvement. We've heard some of that from Sheriff Ryan already, that they've learned as a result of the Butte Fire. And are there any specific steps that you plan to take to improve operations and effectiveness should this occur again? And I see Mr. Chris Post from CAL FIRE in the starting blocks here, so come up and lead everybody off, Chris.
Chris Post with CAL FIRE Amador El Dorado Unit. I'm the division chief responsible for Amador County and the Pine Grove Youth Conservation Camp. And as I speak today, I'll put a little bit of perspective. There are 5 of us in the room, and obviously I don't do this alone, and I have a team, and we have a team of folks. And so I'm going to kind of do a lead-in and then bring up some of the subject matter experts to speak to some of the specific areas where we can improve. But as I speak today, I think it's important to recognize that 4 of the 5 of us here today are Amador County residents, raised our kids here, and 2 of us were evacuated. And I also have the distinction of a previous job of being the battalion chief responsible for the community of Mountain Ranch in West Point. And so this is personal for me, and I think we're very fortunate. And of course, you know, happenstance is what it is, that our fire happened before the Valley Fire. And CAL FIRE's hearts go out to all of the affected communities, and clearly during our initial response, your life and property safety is our first order of business, and in retrospect, you know, we share the pain with everyone that's recovering. But because our fire started first, the local CAL FIRE contingent was all on base, and we were not away at someone else's fire. And we did, even for all of the areas where we can improve, we benefited from the fact. So a couple of things, and because I want to bring some folks up, I'll talk about some areas where we can improve, and And as I reviewed Supervisor Morgan's responses from the community, it's ironic that they are the similar responses that we get on every major incident virtually. And so, you know, in addition to us, you know, our hearts going out to the communities, we initially begin to do an after-action review or an investigation into our own actions at major incidents to ensure we can learn from them, and then we immediately, you know, create plans to prevent those same similar high on our chart. Evacuation and repopulation is always high on the chart. I mean, that's the two things. I mean, citizens don't like to be evacuated and they want to get home as soon as possible, and the speed at which there is demand for information outpaces our ability to create good information. And the challenge is to get correct information out to people and not misinformation. And I'll be bringing up our public information officer here in a couple of minutes. Power issues was indicated as one of the other concerns. This is an area where we actually are making some fairly good strides. I did not see PG&E in the room, but
He's back there.
Oh, there we go. And I'd like to give kudos to PG&E. Obviously, the initial attack phase of the fire directly impacted the electric powerhouse and the ability for the local distribution of power. But PG&E and CAL FIRE work concurrently to work side by side to restore power even while the fire is still burning. So even though it appears as though there was a delay in, you know, reestablishing power to affected areas, you know, we actually put a lot of effort to try and speed that process up, because restoring power then allows for the repopulation of the citizens. And so improvements in those areas are ongoing, and our ability to work cooperatively with PG&E actually is a positive. Misinformation, a little bit of misinformation early on. Just two of us in the room, the time chief, Mike Allegria, and myself. Mike was the initial attack incident commander and responsible for the fire in the first few hours. And I was actually the incident commander responsible from about 5 p.m. Just before it jumped the river to the following morning at about 10 a.m. when the major incident management team took over responsibility for the fire. And during that time, we established a liaison with local law enforcement, Highway Patrol, Amador Sheriffs, Calaveras Sheriffs, and I really want to give them kudos that they jumped right in into a pretty big problem. And it didn't take long for the problem to go over onto the Calaveras County side, and they stuck with the problem. And Captain Gary Redmond from the Sheriff's Department deserves my personal special recognition for the efforts that he put in during the entire incident. And I've talked with Sheriff Ryan about Gary. So, you know, one thing that is a huge positive is the community's compliance with the evacuation orders. And I think it's very important to recognize that if we know up front that the problem is always going to be communication and the problem is always going to be evacuation, then we can better prepare for that. And so I think it's important to prepare your home to stand alone and do your defensible space, to have a plan in place, a plan to communicate with your family, with your neighbors, a plan to be prepared to evacuate on short or little notice. And of course, CAL FIRE, the California Fire Chiefs, the International Fire Chiefs, all support the concept of ready, set, go, so that at the moment we do ask you to evacuate, that you're prepared to do so in the most efficient manner. In addition to law enforcement, I think it's very important to recognize the efforts of our local government and fire department cooperators and the amount of resources and efforts that they gave to CAL FIRE during those first few days, and then to immediately go back to their stations and cover the community during the length of the incident for all the daily incidents that did not stop happening just because we had a big emergency. And so, you know, the fire doesn't only tax the resources working on the fire itself, but it also has, you know, an escalating impact on the public safety resources that remain in the community. The fairgrounds, I can't speak highly enough about the fairgrounds and their ability to support our efforts, including SPI would be the Martell Mills site, and our ability to use that facility, as well as St. Catherine Drexel Church opening up its fairly large parking lot and property for use during the incident days. I appreciate, we're going to bring up Chief Rob Woodrow to talk a little bit about cooperation with the Amador County agencies during the life of the incident. And moving forward, we have identified, Sheriff Ryan and I, the need to do some common messaging on the need to the use of the code red and the use of, for communication and those sorts of things. And we routinely do annual preparedness meetings and spring meetings to prepare for fire season. Those meetings are ongoing, and of course, post the Butte incident, they'll take on all new meaning this year with an opportunity to take a look at the county's all-hazard emergency plan and do those sorts of things to learn, that list that you're creating now to be embedded in updates and improvements to the plan. I'm also going to bring up Chief Tinsley, our unit forester, to talk a little bit about what are we doing moving forward. Obviously, we're not out of the woods. For those of you tracking the rain, we're actually falling behind. As of this week, we're probably 7 inches behind normal rainfall in Amador County. We're not getting ahead. It's no secret the issue of tree mortality coming to the county and the impending problems that's going to bring to us. But I would like Chief Tinsley to come up and talk a little bit about the response that CAL FIRE is providing, what we are doing with your SRA fee dollars, and respond to some of the questions posed by the community today in regards to what efforts can we do and what are we doing in terms of fuels reduction. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Sacramento Regional Incident Management Team. This is the Type 3 incident management organization that provided us a bridge during the first 12 to 14 hours to open that fairgrounds overnight and provide hot breakfast, and the following morning for several thousand emergency responders to print that incident action plan and provide that communication. And those are our cooperators in the fire districts from Sacramento County. And they had come a year or so ago to the sand incident for the same purpose. So before I bring up some of the folks from the unit, I think as I look, and I had the opportunity after managing the incident the first night to spend the next, 16 or 18 days doing the contingency planning for the larger incident that was now mostly in Calaveras County. And out of that, I carry away 2 things. And one is we were able to construct about 55 miles of 200-foot wide bulldozer line that stretches east from Taboo Lake to the Tiger Creek Dam, south from the Tiger Creek Dam to the community of Arnold, and west back to San Andreas. It's quite a sight from the air. But the key is to maintain those fuel breaks into the future. There was a time during the incident when we were planning on the fire potentially reaching the community Arnold, and there was a time in the incident when we were actually considering that the fire might reach the Shake Ridge Road. And so all of those threats were very real and will continue to be real in the future. You can't sugarcoat the threat that's out there. But the second thing, and I think most important thing I take away from it, is that the fire may not have actually been the largest of the 2 incidents in Calaveras County. The recovery might actually be a larger incident than the fire itself. And I think in costs to date, and I don't know this for a fact, but I believe that the recovery has now cost more than the actual firefighting. So I spoke to the board about this in the past, that really moving forward and as a community, we really need to look at planning for a recovery of that scale and the ability to host FEMA and the ability to engage stakeholders and all of those things it would take to make that as painless as possible. So since communications was the #1 issue identified by the community, I'd like to bring up our unit's Public Information Officer, Bryce Bennett. Amador El Dorado unit is proud to have the first WildLand budget-funded Public Information Officer in the state of California. And so he can speak fairly intelligently about the problem that presented itself and what we're going to do moving forward to improve.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to ask you to stay close by, because I think what we hope to get out of this is some responses to some of the, as you touched on, some of the comments from the community, and I think board members have some comments of their own through information and anecdotal stories that they heard during the course of things.
Absolutely.
That's why you get paid the big bucks. Oh, Rob, you've been kicked out.
Good afternoon, board and members. My name is Bryce Bennett, and I come to the Amador and Calaveras unit of CAL FIRE by means of Sacramento headquarters, where I used to work in the communications office. Communications Bureau there is not an infrastructure communications bureau. We don't deal in hardware. We deal in information and dissemination. So how we use social media, how we use media, and how we get the information to the people in event of emergency. We have a standard practice now that we utilize throughout the state. We have a one centralized hub on any given incident so that information is timely and accurate and accurate and accurate and accurate. It's very, very important to us that accurate information is given out. So we always push to make sure that we're looking for incident information. We look at CAL FIRE's homepage. CAL FIRE's homepage, fire.ca.gov, is the only place to get timely, accurate, certified incident information. On the very front page is a current incidents tab. It's clearly marked, it says current incidents, and you can get current fire information for any fire in the state at that time. We also provide links for this information on Facebook and Twitter as well. So my job going forward is to identify all these different areas and places that we can improve, what we can do better to get information out quicker. But the public does have, or you in general, have a generalized idea that we want information to be absolutely immediate. A lot of us have smartphones, but we do need to make sure we proofread and certify that information is 100% accurate. So please, if you take anything from that, make sure you're getting the information right.
Yeah, Bryce.
So, obviously we've identified some concerns. We identified them very early on in the incident. The communication issues that the folks are talking about today, we were talking about on that second day of the incident. And so, what are we going to do to make it better here locally in Amador County? And we have engaged in outreach to ensure that we identify the stakeholders in the communications issue, the radio station, the Amador Fire Safe Council, it's in the sheriff's office, and it's important, though, that as we do that we ensure that the system is integrated, and that when we are creating and delivering information, regardless of the platform of delivery, i.e. through the Fire Safe Council or through the radio station or whatever other community group is delivering in the information, that the information is the incident information coming from the incident management team, the sheriff's department, or the agency having jurisdiction. And that's the challenge, is to ensure that. So the way that we can best ensure that is by engaging them in partnership. And those partnerships were probably not as strong as they could have been on the day of the incident. And moving forward, that's specifically one area that we can improve on and plan on doing so. So another thing that happened during the incident was the ongoing communication between the incident management, both myself initially with the supervisors. I think I woke all of you out of bed that night, and as well as then the incident management team establishing agency representatives at the Amador Fairgrounds. So I'd like to bring up our Division Chief of Administration, Rob Withrow.
Chief Rob, come on up, but I can ask you to sort of dovetail that one comment about communication, sharing, and collaboration with the ham radio side of the world. Want to do that now, or?
Yeah, and I think what we need to do is maybe we can sidebar with that gentleman and make sure he's on our list, because what you want to create is, the tools in the toolbox, and that may be one of the tools in the toolbox to deliver our information in Amador County. I don't think it was an issue of creating incident information. We're pretty good at that. It's usually delivering it, and that's...
Well, and it was the public's outcry, that they needed that instant gratification of instant information, And our point always was, you guys are the providers of accurate, timely information, and you need to be the source of it, and then the dissemination through whatever means, address power outages and lack of cell service and all those types of things. So.
Yeah, generally, it's the conflict is the definition of timeliness.
Yeah.
That's what.
Well, too, plus in the fire, you gotta figure, I mean, hey, people have a lot of angst. I mean, anybody in Amador and Calaveras, maybe even Alpine County had angst when that thing was burning. I'm glad to see Mr. Withrow. I will say, he was our main contact during the fire, and he just did an exceptional job.
And our chauffeur.
And I think we couldn't ask for better, and he was really good to work with. So, I mean, he represented CAL FIRE, I think, very well, and I think he was good to work with, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. So I'm Rob Withrow, work here as the admin officer for the unit. My assignment on this fire was the line officer for the local unit, meaning I was the conduit between our cooperators, etc., the unit, the team, all those things that come into play on a large scale fire such as this. Chief Post covered most of what I was going to discuss. I echo all those things. The fairgrounds, Sheriff Ryan, his office, everybody great to work with, good communications early on. Amador Fire Protection District, myself and Chief Bellery were in contact very early on, and all those things worked out pretty well. No question, we learned a lot. There's things we can do better in the future, no doubt about it. Unfortunately, that's probably going to be the case on every incident this size. We'll have to learn, and I applaud the board, as many of the members of the public said, holding this workshop. That's how we learn. That's how we'll get better. And when I say we, I mean all of us. I think that's extremely important. But one thing I wanted to touch on briefly, we talked about it earlier a little bit, was our local media, KBGC Radio, and then TSPN. We reached out to those folks early on. Unfortunately, our local TSPN, they were evacuated from their homes. There were some challenges there getting their station up, as I understand it. But we did reach out to them early on, and we were able to make contact with them once things settled down for them at home. But KBGC was on the air right away. I reached out and made contact with them, as well as our other PIOs did, and I was just very impressed. As a local resident here in Amador County, one of the things I know is when there's smoke in the air, a lot of our folks tune into the local radio station to hear what's going on. So we did our very best to keep them updated and abreast of the situation, realizing there's challenges with that, and Supervisor Oneto spoke to that earlier. It's hard for us, even in our own agency sometimes, to have the best timely information. These things are unfolding minute by minute. But all in all, I was very impressed with their willingness to share that info and stay on the air. That's all I have.
I just, make a comment. You folks did a great job, outstanding. And I think one of the things that I've been around here 62 years plus, and we haven't had a whole lot of big fires. We had the Rancheria fire back in 1961, and then we've had some fairly big fires down in the Comanche area. So we haven't really been put to the test, but I think going forward, we're going to see more and more of these types of incidents, and particularly now, I'm very concerned about the bark beetle coming off all the trees and making fuel ladders. So, anything we can do to make it better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, I'd like to recognize Carol Mars. I'm not sure she remembers me, but in 2002, I was a fire captain at the Pine Grove camp, and I met with her in her home to discuss signing on to the Pine Acres Fuel Break when we first envisioned the Pine Acres Fuel Break. And Carol was a willing participant then. She's a willing participant now. And as we move on to the next phase of what I'd like to talk about, which is where we're moving, what we're doing moving forward in terms of cooperative efforts in fuels reduction, I'd like to, I think we all need to recognize the success story of the Pine Acres Fuel Break. And I was there the afternoon, I believe this would have been Thursday or Friday between 10 and noon. I got Dave's time-stamped pictures. And when the wind had shifted and the fire made a run back into Amador County and made its head run and hit the Pine Acres Fuel Break. And not to speak a lot about the firefighting operation, because it was successful, and the rest is history, no homes were damaged. But the fact that the fuel break was there and in place, the fact that it was maintained 3 times over the last 13 years speaks fairly highly of not only my own organization, who's physically been doing the work, as well as the Amador Fire Safety Council, who has spearheaded the efforts on the Pine Acres fuel break over the course of its lifetime, securing the funding, to help pay for the crews, as well as the private vendors that have, taken their turns working on that piece of ground. Yes?
So Chris, a question I'd have is, down the road, would it be a good idea maybe if CAL FIRE talked to some of those